Have you ever felt as though the world presses against your chest, slowly day after day, until the weight becomes unbearable? Every glance, every word, every hidden tension, you absorb it, and the walls of your mind seem to bend under the load. You, the empath, the silent vessel, the quiet mirror of the human condition. How long can a soul carry oceans before it finally overflows? Tonight, we journey into the moments when empaths snap, not in rage, but in revelation. What does it mean when the heart finally refuses to be a receptacle for every unspoken sorrow? And more importantly, what rises when the storm finally breaks? You will witness a transformation from mental chaos to inner clarity, from exhaustion to empowerment. By the end, you will understand not just the breaking point, but the awakening that lies beyond it. This is the path of tough love, reflection, and deep self-honesty. Stay with me, because the storm within is only the beginning. If you are ready to confront your inner world without compromise, subscribe now. This journey is not comfort, it is transformation. The empath's burden. Being an empath is both a blessing and a curse. You feel what others cannot. You absorb pain, joy, and tension as if it were your own. You navigate conversations carefully, weigh energy with surgical precision, and often wonder if the world will ever pause to notice your quiet suffering. Your mind becomes a storm, looping endlessly over the fears and emotions of others. You believe that if you can soothe, if you can fix, if you can predict, the chaos might relent. But this is a mirage. Over time, the weight becomes invisible to everyone but you. Your generosity is misunderstood as weakness, your silence mistaken for apathy. You bend constantly, absorbing energies, masking exhaustion, hiding the swelling storm inside. You give until your edges blur, until the line between your own heart and the world's pain disappears. Metaphorically, your mind is a hurricane, your spirit a fragile ship tossed in the sea of collective emotion. Every wave from another's suffering dents the hull, yet you keep sailing, believing in some unspoken duty. Yet there is a breaking point. Every empath reaches the horizon where giving ceases to be a gift and becomes a form of self-erasure. What happens when the storm turns inward, when the mirror shatters, and the empath can no longer carry the world? That awakening begins in the next chapter. The silent accumulation. Emotional overload does not arrive suddenly. It creeps like a shadow over years, one unnoticed moment at a time. The empath collects the world's pain in silence, storing it like precious cargo, believing their heart has infinite capacity. Every slight, every misunderstanding, every toxic vibration compounds. The mind begins a silent inventory, cataloging who caused what energy to ripple, measuring the emotional debt owed by others. Friends may call you too sensitive, overly empathetic, or needy. They do not understand the storm within, the constant vigilance, the nervous system tuned to invisible signals. Letting go is not a choice for an empath. They feel too much, and the boundary between self and other is thin, porous, and vulnerable. Overthinking becomes a reflex. Conversations are dissected for hidden meaning, intentions are mapped like constellations, and every action is scrutinized, not for paranoia, but for survival. Yet with every analysis, the burden grows. Emotional accumulation is silent, invisible, and relentless. It quietly molds the empath into someone unrecognizable, someone who apologizes for feeling, for existing, for breathing. The empath's mind is a glass jar. Each emotion, each unspoken tension is a grain of sand. Over years, the jar fills silently. Eventually, no more can fit. And when it overflows, the shattering is inevitable. How does the empath respond when the jar breaks? When the calm facade can no longer hold the storm? We will see in the next chapter. The illusion of control. Empaths often seek control where none exists. We imagine that if we can read people, anticipate the chaos, soothe every wound, we can bend reality to our favor. But life is not a puzzle to solve. It is a river to navigate, and our illusion of control only tightens the grip of anxiety. The empath clings to patterns, rehearses conversations, rewrites memories, and sometimes apologizes preemptively to an invisible jury of energy. There is an endless pursuit of equilibrium, a hope that if they are enough, then the world will be gentle. Yet control is a mirage. The more we chase it, the further it retreats, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Metaphorically, the empath is like a gardener obsessively pruning storms instead of tending their own soil. Every attempt to direct energy externally neglects the inner landscape, where weeds of resentment, fatigue, and self-doubt quietly thrive. Eventually, the gardener becomes the weed, tangled and overgrown, longing for release. This illusion fosters a cycle. The more we give to control, the less we recognize our own depletion. We forget that boundaries are not walls of selfishness. They are lifelines. Without them, the empath becomes a hollow vessel, a storm with no anchor. When control fails, what emerges in its place? The snapping point approaches, and in the next chapter, we will witness the first cracks in the facade. The first crack. The first crack often appears as subtle exhaustion, tired eyes, shallow sleep, or fleeting irritability. It is easy to dismiss, easy to blame on circumstance. Yet inside, something trembles. That invisible self, the observer of all energies, the silent absorber of pain, begins to fracture. You may snap at a minor inconvenience, cry unexpectedly, or feel an unspoken rage rise without context. This is the body, the spirit, and the mind declaring enough. The empath has carried too much, given too much, and absorbed too much. The crack is the first whisper of self-preservation, a signal that the boundaries, once porous, need repair. Imagine a dam with tiny fissures. Water begins to seep, unnoticed at first, but over time, the pressure builds. When the first breach appears, the river inside cannot be contained. It flows in torrents, indiscriminate, unstoppable, raw. This is not failure. It is awakening. It is the soul reclaiming territory that has long been surrendered to others' demands, energies, and emotional debris. The empath is beginning to realize that protecting oneself is not betrayal, it is survival. What happens when these cracks widen, when the dam can no longer hold? The snapping intensifies, and the next chapter dives deeper into the emotional eruption. Emotional eruption. When an empath snaps, it is not reckless anger. It is a volcanic release of suppressed energy, a surge of truth that has been denied for too long. Years of accommodation, silent apologies, and emotional debt converge into one undeniable eruption. Tears may come unbidden, voices may rise, and boundaries may finally roar their presence. This is not weakness, it is the body, mind, and spirit speaking with uncompromising honesty. The empath discovers that energy can no longer be hoarded or mismanaged. The storm within has become a force of revelation. Imagine a forest fire. It destroys what is dead, overgrown, or weak, but from its ashes, new life sprouts. The empath's eruption is a cleansing force, not a catastrophe. It clears emotional clutter, toxic attachments, and false obligations. The world may be shocked by the intensity, but the empath is finally aligned with their own truth. How does one navigate the aftermath of this eruption? The next chapter explores rebuilding after the storm. Confronting the shadow. After the eruption, the empath confronts their shadow, the parts of themselves they denied, feared, or disowned. Rage, resentment, fear, and grief rise to the surface. These emotions are not enemies. They are guides pointing to neglected boundaries and unmet needs. Many resist the shadow, fearing judgment or shame, but avoiding it prolongs suffering. To heal, the empath must meet these emotions fully, observe them without judgment, and allow their truth to be felt. This is not indulgence. It is courage. The shadow is a mirror, reflecting back everything we refuse to integrate. Facing it is like stepping into a dark cave alone, trusting that the light of your inner awareness will guide you. Only by embracing the shadow can clarity emerge. If this resonates with your journey, pause and commit to this practice today. Journal your feelings without filter. The empath's power grows when shadows are acknowledged. Once the shadow is acknowledged, what arises next is profound. Our next chapter explores the first taste of freedom, The taste of liberation after the storm, there is a brief, fragile taste of liberation. Boundaries are clearer, emotions less entangled, and the empath begins to recognize the distinction between self and other. For the first time, the storm is observed from a distance rather than absorbed. The empath's mind is a sky after a hurricane. Clouds may linger, but the sun pierces through, warming the soil and nurturing new growth. This liberation is not permanent. It must be cultivated daily through conscious awareness, self-compassion, and disciplined detachment. How does the empath maintain this newfound clarity? The next chapter reveals practical strategies for staying anchored. Anchoring in reality clarity is not achieved in isolation. The empath must ground themselves in reality, distinguishing between their perceptions and the energies they absorb. Daily practices, mindful breathing, meditation, physical movement, and digital boundaries. Anchor the empath to their true self. What happens when old patterns resurface despite grounding? Chapter 9 reveals the inevitable challenges that test this clarity. Temptation of old patterns. Even after liberation, the empath is tempted to revert to old habits, absorbing others' pain, overthinking, and apologizing for existence. Awareness alone is not enough. Vigilance is required. Like a sailor navigating familiar reefs, old currents may pull the empath back. Awareness, boundaries, and repeated practice are the compass to navigate these waters safely. The final chapter of Part 1 prepares for the full emergence of the empowered empath. How does one complete the transformation? Emergence. The empath who has snapped and rebuilt emerges transformed, not as a fragile vessel, but as a conscious conduit. The storm has taught wisdom, to give without losing self, to feel deeply without drowning, to live with clarity and calm. The sky after the storm is vast, expansive, and limitless. The empath now recognizes their vast inner landscape, free from the illusion of total absorption. If you feel ready to embrace your own transformation, take one step today. Set a boundary you have been avoiding. Protect your energy with courage and clarity. Part 2 dives into the full awakening, practical defenses, and daily practices to sustain empowered presence. The mirror of others. Once the empath begins to snap out of the constant emotional absorption, they see the world through a new lens. Every person they encounter is no longer just a source of energy to manage. They are mirrors reflecting inner truths. Every frustration, every burst of anger, every deep joy is a reflection of lessons waiting to be learned. The empath realizes that what once felt like relentless bombardment of others' emotions was not an attack, but an invitation to self-awareness. Imagine looking into a mirror, but this one stretches infinitely. It does not judge, it does not blame. It simply reflects patterns, both seen and unseen. The angry coworker reflects unhealed wounds. The needy friend reflects the boundaries the empath has neglected to set. And the quiet moments of kindness reflect the empath's own inner capacity to nurture. This mirror is neither cruel nor comforting. It is honest. And honesty, while sometimes piercing, is a gift. The empath learns that they cannot change everyone. They cannot heal everyone. They can only respond consciously, with presence, with discernment. They are no longer the emotional sponge absorbing chaos. They are the sky, vast and unshakable, holding the clouds without becoming them. How does this reflection transform the way an empath moves in relationships? Chapter 12 will reveal the freedom that comes when emotional mirrors are no longer threats, but guides. If you feel the weight of others' emotions constantly, pause for a moment and breathe. Share this video with someone who might also need to see that freedom is possible. Freedom in relationships. For an empath who has finally snapped, transform. No longer a battlefield where energy is given at the cost of self, they become bridges of conscious connection. The empath learns to engage fully without fear, guilt, or self-erasure. They speak their truth without trembling. They honor silence without shame, and they give love without expectation. Imagine relationships not as rivers that sweep you away, but as bridges. Bridges sturdy enough to carry both joy and tension, yet flexible enough to absorb life's inevitable shifts. Connection becomes mutual and alive rather than transactional and draining. The empath realizes the subtle trap of codependency, the belief that to love, one must sacrifice everything. This trap is discarded. Freedom comes in understanding that boundaries are not barriers. They are declarations of self-respect. Saying no is not cruelty, it is clarity. With these boundaries, relationships bloom instead of suffocate. Toxicity is no longer endured silently, but observed and consciously released. Emotional armor, once feared as rigidity, becomes a shield of wisdom. Freedom in relationships is just one piece. What about the mind, still stormy and restless? Chapter 13 will guide the empath to calm the inner tempest without suppressing it. Calming the storm. The empath's mind has always been a tempest, a chaotic swirl of thoughts, anxieties, and imagined futures. The snapping moment does not erase this storm, but it changes the relationship to it. The empath begins to observe the hurricane rather than be swept away. Thoughts become clouds drifting across the vast sky of awareness. Some clouds are dark, heavy, threatening. Some are light, gentle, fleeting. None are permanent. Meditation, journaling, and mindful breath become tools to anchor consciousness. Each breath is a tether to presence. Each pause, a soft landing amidst the storm. The empath learns to name the waves of thought. This is worry. This is projection. This is fear, without attaching to them. Awareness is the quiet observer at the eye of the hurricane. This chapter is about resilience. It's about noticing how overthinking once kept the empath trapped in cycles of guilt and self-blame. Now, thoughts are simply signals, not chains. They inform, they teach, but they do not define. The storm exists, but the sky, the self, is unshaken. With the mind becoming a calm observer, the next step is confronting the ego that has long dictated survival through fear. Chapter 14 will illuminate how empaths meet themselves without illusion. Meeting the ego. The ego, the voice of judgment, the inner critic, the false self built to survive, finally faces the empath. For years, it whispered that caring for others was duty, that sacrificing oneself was noble. It told the empath they were too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But now in the snapping, the empath sees the ego clearly. The ego is like a shadow puppet on the wall, creating drama and illusion. The empath learns to observe without feeding it. Awareness softens its grip. The ego's fears of rejection, inadequacy, and unworthiness are seen and honored without surrendering to them. The empath begins to reclaim power, learning that their worth is intrinsic, not contingent upon pleasing, soothing, or saving others. This confrontation is not violent, it is compassionate. The empath understands that the ego, though flawed, protected them for years, but it is no longer in control. Awareness and self-compassion replace fear-driven reactions. Once the ego loosens its hold, the empath experiences a deeper emotional clarity. Chapter 15 will explore the liberation that comes when emotional baggage is finally released. Releasing emotional baggage emotions, once accumulated like stones in a heavy backpack, begin to be released. Every resentment, every buried frustration, every unspoken hurt is acknowledged and set down. The empath learns that holding on to emotions only perpetuates suffering. Imagine walking through a forest, each step dragging a heavy pack of grief. With awareness, each stone is removed one by one. Pain is not denied. It is seen, felt, and released. Forgiveness, not for others but for the self, becomes a natural byproduct. Emotional freedom emerges not from avoidance, but from acceptance and conscious letting go. Emotional clarity clears the path toward personal power and confidence. Chapter 16 will explore how the empath transforms from reactive to empowered. Claiming personal power, empaths often feel powerless, giving energy without replenishment. But now the snapping transforms this. Power is not aggression. It is presence, integrity, and alignment with truth. True power is tested when confronting external chaos. Chapter 17 will explore how the empath navigates a turbulent world with calm authority. Navigating external chaos. The world remains messy. People act unpredictably, systems fail, crises arise. But the empath now moves through it with grounded awareness. Reactions are measured, emotional turbulence is contained, and energy is conserved. With outer navigation mastered, the empath now confronts a subtler battlefield, the ego-driven mind in others. Chapter 18 will teach a discernment in emotional interactions, discernment and energy boundaries. Discernment becomes a superpower. The empath sees whose energy to absorb, whose to observe from a distance. Boundaries are no longer fear-based, they are clarity-based. Picture a pond. You allow the rain to fall, but you do not let the mud cloud the water beneath. Presence protects, yet compassion remains. The empath's journey approaches a higher synthesis, integrating wisdom into life. Chapter 19 will reveal the awakening of purpose and spiritual alignment. Spiritual alignment awareness expands beyond self. The empath connects with universal rhythm, understanding that emotions, challenges, and people are teachers. Life is no longer personal attacks, but reflections of growth. Like rivers merging into an ocean, the empath's energy aligns with flow, purpose, and intuitive knowing. Peace is no longer aspirational, it is lived. Finally, the empath achieves integration. Chapter 20 will deliver practical clarity and daily tools to sustain this newfound peace. Integration and daily practice. Integration means living consciously. Daily rituals support clarity. Here are 10 practices you can use today to help solidify that newfound clarity. 1. Morning mindfulness meditation. 2. Journaling emotions without judgment. 3. Setting daily energy boundaries. 4. Practicing deep breathing during stress. 5. Nature walks for grounding. 6. Selective social engagement. 7. Mindful consumption of media. 8. Conscious sleep hygiene. 9. Expressive arts for release. 10th gratitude practice for anchoring joy. The empath now embodies calm, clarity, and presence. Their snapping was not destruction, it was rebirth. If this journey resonated, commit to one practice today and share your experience with someone who needs this awakening. Transformation begins in action. I am the sky. The storms pass, but I remain vast, clear, and whole.